Since we're doing a series on ethical dilemmas in the Parsha, we come to what might be the greatest ethical dilemma of all time, otherwise known as the Akedah. The Akedah evokes different reactions from different people. And that's what I'd like to focus on tonight. Is this question, and the question is very simple, and the dilemma is something which almost any student of the Torah has already pondered, which is what happens when Hashem instructs someone directly to commit one of the most atrocious crimes that we can imagine. What happens when Hashem instructs a father to take the life of his son? His only son, his beloved son. And the answer that you have to come to, in the end, you already know the answer, is that the answer is yes, you have to do it. How do we know that you have to do it? Because Avraham passes this 10th, and according to most opinions, final test. The question is, how do we connect what seems to be extremely difficult concept to understand and to then justify it? And justifying isn't enough. Just finding an excuse to make it better isn't enough. We need to show that this is what all of us should do. And that's almost impossible to do. So, in order to understand this a little bit, we have to focus on the words of the Torah, because the Torah itself is going to try to make us understand. The pasuk begins, if you want to follow along inside, we're going to do some of the Rashis here. On page 100, 101. And it was after these things, meaning something had happened, and after that, V'ha'elokim nisa es Avraham, and Hashem, how do we translate that? Let's go with tested Avraham. Vayomer Elav, and says to him, Avraham, Vayomer Hineni, and Avraham says, Hineni. Hineni means, Nasa v'nishma, whatever you want, I'm here for you. Of course, until he hears what it is that Hashem wants. And he tells him, take your son, your only son, the one you love, Yitzchak, and take him to Hara Moriah. And let's avoid translating these words for now. V'ha'aleu sham la'olah, bring him up as an offering, let's just leave it at that, and one of the mountains which I shall show you.
I have a question about this, and I've always wondered about this one. He wasn't his only son, and Abraham, I assume, loved both his sons. So I've always been puzzled by this particular phrase. So why Hashem puts it that way.
Rashi also is puzzled
right.
by it, and he gives you the answer to it.
Well, Rashi says because Avraham was considering Yishmael when he said son. And so Rashi says, why didn't you just start off saying Yitzchak? It's because he was breaking it to him slowly. Saying the name would have been too painful right away. If he would have said, I want you to take Yitzchak up, so he said, I want you to take your son, and then at that point Avraham says, which son? And slowly, by the time he's able to find out what it is, he's somewhat processed it. That's the way Rashi explains it, although I'm sure we could find something, a little more meaning in that Rashi itself. That is an important point. There's a whole question about Yechidcha, which Mr. Shem will talk about that on Sunday as well. But the question here is, what exactly does Hashem want from Avraham? What is the point here? What is the purpose of a test? Why is he being tested? Who is marking the test? Why have this test? And here is the more important question. I don't know if it's more important. Here's another important question, which is, what was Hashem intending to do based on the different options that Avraham Avinu could have taken? What were Avraham's options? To say no, and then what? Hashem would have said, well, then you failed the test. We'll wait for a greater person than you to come along, maybe. And what if Avraham, what's considered passing the test? Does Hashem ever intend for Yitzchak to be killed? I think most of us assume, and we'll see soon it's clear in the Rashi like that the whole thing was never meant to mean that he would actually be killed. So the whole thing was just what's a good word? Trick?
Ruse.
A ruse? It was a game that Hashem was playing with Avraham. That doesn't sound right? No. So something's happening here, which is very important, because Avraham needs to go through this very painful, very difficult, very challenging experience, and there's a reason and there's a purpose here.
I've always thought that maybe the failing the test would have been arguing with Hashem, like saying, "But Hashem, you told me that we shouldn't, not give our children to Moloch. We should not be sacrificing children. You said that was wrong."
Right. So we're going to see that opinion. You'll see that has its sources in the commentaries. Hopefully we'll get to that.
Does, and now, just because you call so much attention to the words, once it says Ba'aleu Sham, and then it adds La'olah, if we were just trying to say, bring them up as an Olah, do we need to say La'olah? What, doesn't Ba'aleu mean...
No.
Well, you could bring mala someone as a chatas. So mala just means to bring up. So anytime you place something on an altar, that's called being mala it.
Uh-huh.
So I guess it could work you still would need the word ola, seemingly.
Also, B'haleu, the Har HaMoriah, let's say he said, or to Echad HaArim, they would just bring him up to the mountain. It doesn't mean...
Well, we'll see. Rashi's going to work with that word. But let's work from a different direction. Let's start from the beginning here. Let's first try to understand Achar HaDevarim Ha'ela. Everyone knows the Rashi, but we'll see the different opinions. The Akedah is a response to something. Otherwise, it should have said, V'ha'elokim nisa es Avram. Hashem tested Avram. The Torah begins specifically with Vayihi, and it was. Achar HaDevarim Ha'ela, after these events occurred, Hashem tested Avram. So there's some type of event which occurred, which brought about, which caused, which triggered the need for this test. And so Rashi is all over this. Rashi quotes from the Gemara, and I'm going to read the Rashi inside, if you want to follow along on page 100. Achar HaDevarim Ha'ela, Yesh me Rabbi Seinu Omrim, there are those of our sages who explain, Achar Devarav Shel Satan, that the Akedah takes place after, as we'll see, God and Satan have a debate. Shaya Mekatreg v'Omer, the Satan is coming to complain about Avraham. That's his job. He's the prosecutor. His job is to try to find fault in every person, especially in the righteous. It's hard to find fault in the righteous, so he works extra hard. Mikol Suda Sha'asa Avraham. This whole party that Avraham made, Lo hikriv lefanecha par echad o ayel echad. He did not sacrifice a single bull or a single ram. The Satan has a complaint, and seemingly a valid complaint, that Avraham has a son, and we have yet to see him show any tribute for the birth of Yitzchak. He makes a big party, invites all his friends, invites all the dignitaries of the world, and never says thank you to Hashem. Sounds like a pretty serious complaint against Avraham.
Which party are you talking about? Are you talking about
when
with Avimelech? Are you talking about when Yitzchak?
Well, it sounds like, you read the Rashi, it's referring all the way back to many, many years ago, almost 4 decades before, when Avram threw a party, B'yom Higamel as Yitzchak, on the day of Yitzchak's bris, or that's one of the explanations. So for almost 37 years, the Satan has had this complaint. It doesn't mean he started complaining now. I mean, there's some commentaries who say he started to complain now. But seemingly, this has been a complaint, this has been an issue with Avraham Avinu, that he, look at last week's parsha. He begs Hashem for children. He complains, I can't have children. He does all these things, and all these, Hashem takes him out with the stars and all that, and he has a child, and we see no reaction on the part of Avraham, where Avraham falls to his feet and thanks Hashem and says, "Thank you, Hashem, for all that you've done for me." So that's a problem. So Hashem's response is, Amar lo, Hashem answers, Klum asa ela b'shvil beno. Why did he do this? Why did he do all of this? He did all of this because the party he threw, is because he was so happy about the birth of his son. So you think that Avraham cares more about himself than he does for the service of Hashem? Do you know what you're talking about? Ilu hayisi omer lo zaveach osa lefanai. If I would say to Avraham, sacrifice your son before me, lo haya ma'akev. What does ma'akev mean?
He wouldn't hold back.
He wouldn't hold back. He would just do it. I mean, not just that he'd eventually follow through, but that it wouldn't be an issue. How does that answer the question? The question is that Avraham did not celebrate. Avraham did not thank Hashem. Avraham did not give tribute to Hashem for the birth of his son. And the answer is, are you kidding me? If I would ask him to give back that son to me, he would give it back. What's the debate here? So let's take one of the approaches before we move on to the second explanation of Rashi, and this is an important approach. That is the approach of the Ramban. The Ramban learns that the word Nisa is not to be translated as test, but Va'elukim Nisa as Avraham, Hashem lifted up Avraham. Nisa, which is a trial, the way we translate it, but really the source for it is to lift up, because that's what a trial or a test does, is it elevates. The actual root of the word is to be nosei, to hold, to carry, to lift up, to bear. So says the Ramban, and I quote, Inyan anisoon is because Maisa ha'adam, the actions of man, Reshus muchlatas biyado, he has complete free will whether to do or not. Aval hamanase yizbarach, Hashem, who was testing him, yitzave bo lahotzi hadavar min hakoach el hapoel. Hashem wants to bring the potential within Avraham to reality. Meaning, the fact that Hashem says, Avraham is my servant because he would, is not good enough, says the Ramban. It might be that Avraham has a potential accomplishment, but it doesn't count as an accomplishment. V'elokim nisa as Avraham, Hashem saw that Avraham was only this high in terms of his service of Hashem, and so Hashem lifted him up by having him bring the extreme potential within Avraham's free will to a level of reality, which is to at least begin the process, to start to go through with it. However, he says, V'da, ki Hashem tzadik yivchan, Hashem only does this to someone when he knows that the person would pass the test. If a person would not pass the test, then he would not give that person a nisayon. Now, it's different than the way we usually say a person never gets a challenge that they couldn't beat, right? No one ever has a challenge that they're not capable of overcoming. People say, it was too difficult for me. It was difficult. It wasn't too difficult. Every single test that everyone has in their life, they could pass. However, that's not necessarily using the word nisayon or nisa to lift up. The Ramban tells us an amazing idea that Nisa is only when Hashem knows the person is going to pass. Hashem already knows that this person would do it, so he just wants to bring it to reality, and therefore Hashem gives Avraham this challenge to do it, knowing that he's going to pass the test, and allowing Avraham to be on the level that Hashem knew he really is on.
Now, David Hamar Basheva, didn't he ask for a test?
Right.
Did he say that?
Right.
And he didn't pass it.
So over there it says there the word is not nisayin, it's bechina. It's a little different. But he said because bechina doesn't mean to lift up. Bechina means to scrutinize. But nisayon means to lift up. I have to see if the Gemara uses the word nisayon. But certainly the pasuk uses the word bechina. However, that's the Ramban's take on the concept of Nisayon and the test of the Akedah, bringing that back to us. So basically, Hashem says to the Satan says he didn't bring tribute. So Hashem says, didn't bring tribute. Avram and I have such a close relationship that I know how grateful he is. And he knows how grateful I am. And therefore that's good enough. But it isn't good enough. And so therefore Hashem has to show how grateful or how fearful of Hashem Avram really is. So that's the pshat, that's the explanation of the debate between the Satan and God. The Satan wants to see the money. He wants to see the actual accomplishment. And Hashem says this would be like, many, I won't say which gender, but there's one gender that has difficulty saying to the other gender what it is that they're supposed to say, because that person should already know that that's true. But the fact is that even if the other gender knows that that's what the first gender is thinking, you still have to say those things, because you have to bring the potential to reality. So that's the debate between Satan and Hashem.
Hashem have to answer to the Satan, and that seems to be
Because
backwards.
Hashem gave him a job. His job is to prosecute, and as long as he brings a good argument, the attribute of judgment has to respond to that. If it is a requirement of man to actually speak and say the things he's supposed to say, do the things he's supposed to do. If a person has it in potential, we all know he would do it, but doesn't do it, that's not good enough. And if that's a valid complaint on the part of the Satan, then Hashem says to Abraham, listen, the Satan is saying you have to do it, you got to follow through.
Is this test is sort of like a payback for Abraham? Because Abraham asked Hashem, show me the money. Now the Satan is coming back and say to Abraham, show me the money.
It's good. We're going to see the third explanation is going to cover that. Let's hold on to the whole Akedah being a punishment approach. First, let's look at at this, which is more that it's uplifting, and we're going to get there is such an opinion. We'll get to that soon. Okay, so again, we've put together the first pshat of Rashi, which is that this was a result of a debate between the Satan and Avram, saying that Avram hasn't done enough. And Hashem, using the Ramban, Hashem would be saying, well, listen, who said he has to do it? I know, you know he would do it. The Satan says, no, if Avram's going to defend himself from this prosecution against him, he's actually got to do it. Which means then that the Akedah is a way for Avraham to prove his real loyalty to Hashem, and do that in the form of a reality. That's approach number one. We'll come back to how this helps to resolve the ethical dilemma soon. Approach number two, back in Rashi. Says Rashi, Vayeira omrim, some say, Achar devarav shel Yishmael, that this was not a result of a debate between God and Satan. This was a result of a debate between Yishmael and Yitzchak. Shahaya mispa'er al Yitzchak. Yishmael was, I'm going to mistranslate, was mocking Yitzchak. He was holding himself over Yitzchak by saying, Shemal ben Yud Gimel Shana v'lo Micha. He got a bris at the age of 13 years old when he was already a strapping young man, and still he didn't complain. And that's a big deal for a 13-year-old boy to listen to his father for anything is already a miracle. So for him to listen to his father, to go through a procedure such as that, certainly. Amalo Yitzchak, so Yitzchak says to him, Be'ever echad atam yareni? You're outdoing me with one limb? Ilu amar li HaKadosh Baruch Hu zavach atzmecha lefanai. If Hashem would have said, give your life for me, Lo hayisim akiv, same words. Lo hayisim akiv, I wouldn't have any issue with that. So now what? So what happened here? So what does Hashem say to Abraham? We've got to prove Yitzchak's words. Let Yitzchak put his money where his mouth is. Is that what it sounds like Rashi is saying? That Yitzchak has to prove himself because he made a claim. Why do we have to take a person up on an altar in order to justify Yitzchak's claim made in some argument with his sibling. Especially if you remember that, according to most opinions, this debate between Yitzchak and Yishmael took place, just like the party did, many years before Yishmael is kicked out of the house. Now, Yishmael is kicked out of the house when he is a teenager, and his brother Yitzchak is but a small child. Which means this is a debate between, let's say, a 20-year-old and a 7-year-old. And we have to respond and deal with the whole story of the Akedah as a result of this. Doesn't that sound difficult? Okay, good. The Targum Yonasan helps resolve this a little bit. I know I'm quoting a lot of different opinions, but the point is to get a few specific themes across. The Targum Yonasan reads as follows. I'm translating from the translation into a translation. And it was after these things when there was a debate between Yitzchak and Yishmael. Yishmael said, I should inherit, father, because I am his firstborn son. To which Yitzchak said, I will inherit, father, because I am the son of his true wife Sarah, and you are the son of the maidservant of my mother. To which Yishmael said, but I have more merit than you because I got a bris at 13, and if I would have fought back, they wouldn't have been able to circumcise me. But you were 8 days old and you didn't know what you were doing. To which Yitzchak responded, I am now, well, depending on the age he was at that time, if Hashem would ask me to give up all my limbs, I would not hold back. Which means, the Targum Yonasan is making this somewhat easier. That the debate between Yitzchak and Yishmael is actually a debate over the legitimacy of who is the true son of Avraham. This debate is not just a debate of my courage is greater than your courage, which one of us can throw this baseball further. That's not what this debate is about. This is about who merits to be the true heir of Avraham. And somehow Yitzchak and Yishmael both understood that being the true son of Avraham is a result of one attribute, Mesiras Nefesh.
It's interesting that the Arabs during Ramadan practice a form of self-mutilation as a
Is that common throughout, or is that?
It is in month of Muharram, and it is done by only the Shiite.
Okay. But whoever would do it, it would be interesting if their claim, or at least if the debate between Yitzchak and Yishmael is over who is able to be Moser Nefesh more. Now, where do you think that comes from? I think it comes because seemingly, Atahu Hashem Elokim Asher Bacharta Ba'Avram. We say this every day in the davening. You, Hashem, are the one who chose Avraham, and you took him out of Ur Kasdim. What happened in Ur Kasdim that Avraham was chosen? That Avraham was willing to have himself thrown into the fiery flame in order to declare his belief in God, or to declare that he believes in the one and only God. Which means that if Avraham is being chosen from amongst all the nations, then that must be the most important factor in the world. And therefore, Mesiras Nefesh is the character which will show who is the true son of Avraham. So he says to Mesiras Nefesh, we know that there's a great Mesiras Nefesh, the whole concept of Bris Milah. But you were 8 days old. I was 13 years old. I am the true heir of Avraham. That's what Yishmael is saying. Which means, seemingly, that according to the Targum Yonasan, the debate here has to be resolved because Yishmael's argument is a fair argument. Yishmael says, I am the one who has done a greater act of Mesiras Nefesh. I have given or done Bris Milah. Bris Milah is Mesiras Nefesh, and I did it at the age of 13 when there was a much greater level of Mesiras Nefesh. And so therefore you have to have the Akedah, where Yitzchak is willing to allow himself to be brought as an Olah in order to justify Yitzchak's being chosen, which is kind of ironic, because if he's going to die, he's not going to be the heir of Avraham. So he has to prove that he's the true heir of Abraham by giving up his life, in which case he would not be the heir of Abraham, but that's what it requires. It requires so much selflessness that you're even willing to forego what it is that you're fighting for. That, seemingly, is approach number 2 in the Akedah.
But could that really be the only attribute that matters?
At
Mesiras Nefesh is the only thing that matters?
Well,
I mean, all the other things that Avram did, the fact that he's, that he believes in Hashem and...
well, they both believe in Hashem, let's assume, that Yishmael and Yitzchak both believe in Hashem. Although I heard someone say chesed, we don't find so much that Yitzchak was doing chesed, but we do find Yishmael was doing chesed. Yugach Na'at Mayim, when the angels came and Avram says, let there be taken, so we assume all those declarations that Avram makes, let there be, Vayeira Anar, right? That it's all Yishmael who is doing all that stuff. So we do find Yishmael associated with Chesed. You have to assume that the attribute of Chesed is important and definitely a factor. But seemingly within this debate, or at least the way Targum Yonasan has it, which is I am the true heir because it sounds like that would be the most important factor. Maybe not the only one, but the most important one.
Maybe Abraham had both. Maybe originally he had this Mesiras Nefesh, that's what kind of put him on the map. And then as he developed and he grew, his level of chesed, he became known for chesed.
Right. Okay, that's good. I wasn't going to say this yet, but let me say this now. As one of the resolutions to this major problem of the Akedah, just because you've already touched on the subject, so let's go straight there, then we'll go back to the third approach, the third and final approach here. The issue is like this. We're told that there are 2 luchos, and we usually explain that on the right side of the luchos are the laws of between God, man and God, and on the left side are the laws between man and man. And the laws between man and man, seemingly, are natural morals. Let's call them that way. They're natural morals, they're instinctive morals. Don't kill, don't commit adultery, don't steal, do not lie. Let's call it that, even though that's not really what it means. Don't testify falsely, but let's call it don't lie, and don't be jealous. Those are 5 seemingly logical, they make sense. The other 5, honoring parents is a little bit not so, but the other 5 are not necessarily a logic, but they are rules that God gave. Certainly, Shabbos is not something which, if we wouldn't have the Torah, we would think of on our own. So the question is, why does Hashem, if He's only going to give 10 mitzvahs to start off with, why mention all those, don't steal and don't kill, which are sort of obvious? If you're going to make a big deal about something, find something which isn't so natural and put that on the big board.
Why are you saying that it is so obvious? I don't know that it is really. I mean, if you look at societies all over the place, and even among Jewish society, so people will take things and people are taking things all the time.
Yeah, how about the 1% argument? That's the President of the United States makes that argument that that's nothing but lo tachmod.
For desiring what other people have. I think you're both right, except that it's not because any of us are denying the prohibition of coveting. We just say that that's an exception. In other words, generally we do agree with the concept of coveting. I think everyone agrees you're not supposed to steal. We just have different opinions about what's considered stealing. But the concept itself, which is that you shouldn't steal, it's almost, at least we think, that it's natural. And that's the question. That's a very, very important question. Is it natural? If there would have been no law given from God, and it's hard to know what if, because what if questions are very difficult.
From the other beings, from an ant, from different animals,
Right.
from different...
Right, but would we have known that you're not supposed to kill?
Not as a commandment, would have been like an attribute.
Why?
Dog.
No, animals kill each other all the time. If someone comes into my space, I kill him.
Cain killed Abel.
Well, they might have had the prohibitions already by Adam. They might have had 6 prohibitions already. So he might have been commanded not to do it. But I'm saying, what if God hadn't given any such rules? What if God had just dropped men? Would men have been allowed to kill each other?
I
So
think societies would have put some sort of would come up with certain rules to prevent that from happening generally, because if everyone kills each other, you don't have a society.
Right,
anymore.
but if the rule is for the
But-
sake of convenience, in other words, I want to live, and I know you want to live, so the two of us are going to agree that if anyone tries to kill either of us, we're going to protect each other. So instead, what I'm going to do is I'm going to hire 100 people within my city, call them police officers, and tell them they're in charge to make sure nobody kills anyone. But that's just a matter of convenience. Is it a moral issue? Would it have been morally inappropriate, or just something we've all agreed to do for the sake of our
I think it would have
convenience?
just been convenience. The fact that we need all these police shows
Well,
that it's not instinctive.
Well,
to-
I don't think that shows that, because people have inclinations and they do it despite the fact that they know it's morally wrong. The question is, would there be such a thing as any moral concept if there would be no divine word at all? Would there be morals at all? Or would it just be things that we agreed on to do for the sake of convenience? That's a question. And there's really no way to prove it, because we don't know what our minds would be without the world which we have as it is.
But there are countries where they believe in idols and things like that, but it's all sort of made up. So they make up.
But
Make
we
up
don't know how much
rules.
influence they've had. What are their rules regarding murder?
There are some societies where, if you murder, you're wonderful and you get 1,000,000 virgins or 27 or however many. I mean, these are.
But only if you kill the infidels. Only if you kill infidels. Not if you kill anyone. So they, again, we're saying they have the concept of murder, it's corrupt in their minds. But we're saying, would there be such a concept if you shouldn't kill?
Now what's the difference?
Very good. So what's the difference? The difference is very important. When I see money, somebody left their wallet on the table, and I say, hey, it looks like there's a lot of money sticking out of there. Maybe I should take it. They'll never know. Why should I not do it? Should I not do it because it's not the right thing to do? Or should I not do it because the Torah says you should not steal?
All of the above.
Well, it's either one or the other.
It's because the Torah says. That's what Hashem wants.
In other words, what's the real reason? Is it because am I doing it? And it's an important halacha, because by mitzvahs you're supposed to have kavanah, you're supposed to intend. Should you say, that's a terrible thing to do, I can't believe I would even think of doing that. Imagine the pain that person was going to feel. Or should I say, actually, you know what? I want to do it. But God told me I shouldn't do it, so I'm not going to do it.
Are you talking about a Ben Torah?
Yes. I'm talking about the Gadol Hador. The Gadol Hador sees money, and obviously he's not going to take it. But why is he not taking it? Is he not taking it because he wants to be a proper, refined person and do the right thing? Or is he not taking it because God said you shouldn't take it?
So we say a person shouldn't say, I don't like ham. You should say, I'm keeping away from it because it's a mitzvah.
Right.
Not
So,
because-
very good. So you're pulling out that famous Gemara. The Gemara says a person is not supposed to say, ach, pig is disgusting. You're supposed to say, I would like to have pig, but the Torah says I shouldn't do it. However, the Rambam disagrees with you. Because the Rambam says, with anyone who would take the Rambam says that that's only true of mitzvahs between man and God. Mitzvahs between man and God, so there's no reason why you're doing it other than because God said so. So therefore, you're supposed to say, I would like to eat pig, but I'm not going to because God said so. But when it comes to killing, you're not supposed to say, I would like to kill that person, but because God said so, I shouldn't do it. Rather, you should say, I'm not going to kill because you're not supposed to kill. That's the Rambam, because it's not moral to kill. That's the Rambam. The Rambam in his 8 Prakim, his introduction to Pirkei Avos. So this actually ends up being a big debate amongst the Rishonim.
But who decides what's moral? We said the Rambam says it's not moral to kill, but who decides what's moral?
So we don't know where it comes from, but once we have basically anything which has been Adam Lachavero, seemingly, the Rambam describes this at length. He calls them mitzvahs muskalos, mitzvahs which are within the intellect, and mitzvahs outside of the intellect.
But we're so influenced by the society. I mean, first there's Judaism, and then the offshoot of Christianity, and then also Muslim where they all believe that you shouldn't kill.
Absolutely. And
So-
the way the Rambam is going to explain that is that once the Torah is given to us and has given us things which we believe to be instinctive or natural and things which are unnatural, so regardless of what originally caused that natural and the unnatural, that's going to be the difference between the things you should say I would like to do and the things I wouldn't like to do. Even though you're right, those are possibly all illusions.
Because the generation of Noah, they didn't keep any, they didn't mind stealing from each other.
Right.
And they would steal small amounts to,
Okay, so
so that's not instinctive, obviously, because in their generation.
okay. Well, they did know it was wrong, but they had mitzvahs b'nei Noach.
Yeah,
They did know it was wrong. They just were transgressing it.
But when you look at things that are instinctive, I think it might be useful to think about, when you're talking about instinctive as opposed to learned moral behavior, it might be useful to look at how do small children,
Right.
babies, 1-year-olds, 2-year-olds, 3-year-olds act and see what they do. That's the instinctive stuff.
I'm not sure about that. You see, because they don't have the
No,
philosophical.
little, and they take things away from each other and they'll bop each other.
But that's
in the
because
back.
they might not understand the concept of possession. But if we were to put into their minds the concept of possession and ownership and fair, maybe they would, even at that age, choose better. They'd have the concepts. The question is really, what would happen is if a person lived by himself for 50 years and then we brought them out and we asked them, so what do you think about this thing I'm holding? Do you think it's okay for you to take it? Assuming somehow you could teach them language and all these other things. But that would really be the test. You'd have to have someone with all their faculties make that choice.
What is called natural law? What people in a community make up so-called natural law, like
Right.
what-
The problem is that's sort of what we're questioning, is what would be the natural law. Okay. Yeah.
I was just gonna say, I mean, in our own society, we have abortions and euthanasia.
But I want to keep this distinction going, that the society agrees with the concept of thou shalt not kill. They just have their own definition of what's called killing, what's called a person, which things override you should not kill. But
Don't you mean murder instead of kill, though? Aren't we using the wrong terminology? Because there are times when it's a mitzvah to kill.
right, you're right. It is murder of a case where it's not. But I want to keep that distinction. We're not discussing whether someone has a specific detail within their system of thou shalt not kill, which disagrees with our system of thou shalt not kill. I'm talking about would there be no such concept? And even those who are for all types of killings, they agree that there's a general concept, they just limit it to certain cases.
Now, I'm not up on specifics of research or whatever, but, are you saying, like, for instance, if an anthropologist found a civilization that had not been touched by Judaic-Christian standards, would they have...
The problem is they still might have Noahide standards, which are rooted very deep somewhere.
Okay.
So it would be impossible for us to really test this. That's why it's such a...
Okay,
it's
that's
such a...
why I didn't know if
Right,
that was
right.
outside.
So here's the thing. If you're telling me, which I'm hearing from some people, that there really is no such thing as you should not kill, it's all because of the command of God, then in a case where God instructs someone to kill, it's not immoral. If the root for the whole concept is if that person deserves, it's not the other way. If the whole reason why we don't kill, or the whole reason why we don't steal, why we don't do any of these things, is because God instructed so. So then in a case where God instructs otherwise, it's not that God is making an exception. This case is no longer immoral because it doesn't have the source of what makes it immoral, which is God's concept of we shouldn't kill.
So that would allow the arcade.
So then in that case, when we ask, how could God allow something when God throughout the Torah considers this one of the most heinous crimes that you can do, which is to be makriv to the molech, the answer is because that's within the area of the concept of you shouldn't kill. But if God says you kill him, then that becomes the moral.
Permissive, right.
More than permissible. That's what the moral is.
The right thing.
Which means that if God would drop all people on the world, chas v'shalom to say such a thing, but I'm just trying to make a point. God would drop 50 humans on the earth and say, kill each other, then morality would be to kill as many people as you could.
Well, with the conquest of Eretz Yisrael, right, there's certain
Right,
people
that's
that
what I
would
was
be
thinking.
wiped out completely.
All right, I mean, even there, the Mefarshim try to justify it. But yes, to a certain extent. So what we're saying is that Avraham needs to show that everything that he's doing, all the chesed he's doing, all the efforts that he's doing, are not because he has some inclination. He's a nice guy. It's not because he is just a softie. He's generous, he's kind, he's unable to see the pain of others. All those things which we associate with people who are generally kind, that's not kindness. Kindness is where I want to hit that guy for what he did. But instead, I show that person kindness and I speak to them nicely. That's chesed. If I see someone in pain and it bothers me and I help them, that's not chesed. That's just you going out of your way to resolve your pain. Compassion, but it's really for yourself. Abraham needs to qualify everything he's ever done, ever, by doing the one thing which is the most opposite of what his nature is. Hashem says, I want you to take everything that you've done up till now and throw it in the garbage. Everything that you've worked up till now. I want you now, take that. Right? It's unbelievable. A person, is told by the king, I need this. This is my special crown. I want you to build it. The man says, build this. It'll take me 20 years. The king says, I want you to do it. And 20 years gives him material. They're shipping. The whole world is watching this. And so this person spends 20 years building the crown, or let's use a better example, building the palace of the king. And then the king says to him, now I want you to take a wrecking ball and smash it. 20 years of work. The whole world was watching to see. This person feels that sense of accomplishment, and now the king says, I want you to smash it. What's his reaction? What would this servant react? Your Highness, this is 20 years worth of work. But you know what? When that reaction means, I'm doing it for myself. That reaction would ruin everything. So says someone mentioned this before, I think Dr. Appleson, the Netziv mentions this. He says that the real challenge for Avraham was that moment when Hashem says to him to do it, what's his reaction? And he says especially when Hashem comes to Avraham and tells him he's going to destroy Sodom, the Netziv says, Avraham is supposed to debate God. He's supposed to argue with God. Avraham instinctively understood that and starts to say, whoa, Hashem, what do you think you're doing? This is not fair. Chalila, the judge of the world, should do such an injustice. I am but dust and ashes, but still, let's make a deal. Let's discuss this. Let's not be so rash. Avram's debating God, and Avram's right. Hashem says, that's exactly what I want from him. And now the whole thing is a setup. Because Hashem comes to Avraham all these years later, 38 years later, and says to Avraham, take up your son and sacrifice him. And Avraham is supposed to say, okay, I'll do it first thing in the morning. That's the test. What's his reaction? Now, how is Avraham supposed to know the difference in this case and Sodom? We could spend a whole class just discussing this, on what the clues are. But the thing is, who are you doing this for? That's really the test here, according to the Netziv. And the difference is not what you're going to do, but that immediate reaction. Because in the end, Avram's going to do it. Hashem said so. Or the way some commentaries say, it's never immoral to kill someone who Hashem tells you to kill, because Hashem could kill him himself. So the test is how he reacts. And let's take this a step further. I want to get this in because we're running short on time, but we all know the famous Rashi. This is Rashi towards the end of the Akedah, where Hashem says to him, Ki ata yadati. This is Hashem says, don't touch that kid. Because the Rashi quotes that Avram says, can I just draw a little blood? Just to have, he was afraid that that maybe he had done something wrong, that he had failed. So Hashem says to him, no. Ki ata yadati, you're done. Amar Rabbi Abba, this is on page 102 in the left column. Amar Avram, afarish lefanecha sichasi. Avram says, I don't understand. Yesterday you told me, meaning previously you told me, ki Yitzchak yikarei lechazar. Yitzchak will be your descendant. V'chazarta v'amar, then you say, kachna az bincha, take your son up. Achshav ata omer li al tishach yad chalanar, and now you say to me, don't touch this child. What is going on? Well, how am I to understand this? Amar HaKadosh Baruch Hu. No, lo achalal brisi, mitzvah fasal lo ashan. Hashem says, you didn't listen to my words carefully. Kashamarti lecha kach, I never said shechtim. I said bring it up. You brought him up, now bring him down. Okay, is that a game? Hashem says, oh, you weren't listening? Does that mean that Avraham was failing the whole time when he thought he was supposed to kill his son? So I'd like to explain, this is the simple Pshat in Rashi. I'm not adding anything, I think many people misunderstand this. I think the simple understanding is that Hashem said to Avraham, I want you to bring him up to sacrifice him. Hashem didn't say, I want you to bring him up on the altar and take him down. I want you to bring him up to kill him. Bring him up to kill him, don't kill him. Bring him up with the intention of killing him. That's what I wanted. And when you bring him up for the intention of killing him, you have actually fulfilled. Right? Not I said bring him up and you thought I meant to kill. No, Hashem meant bring him up to kill. And Avram passes the test by bringing him up to kill. Meaning, Avram had to have in mind, he believed, as some say, Avram had a suspicion that Hashem didn't really mean it. Because he knew that there was a promise. And the commentaries say that the Gemara says that Satan wanted to ruin the Akedah and comes to Avram and says, by the way, I heard from behind the curtain that there's a ram that's going to be there instead. And Avram says to him, I don't believe you. And he didn't believe him. Meaning, even though the Satan, who's not lying, because the Satan is not allowed to lie, he's allowed to twist things. Avram says, I don't believe you. He has to have the intent to bring Yitzchak up. And I'll see if I can fit this in. But the point is here that Abraham has to disregard everything that he represents, everything that he knows, because it's not about him. The mitzvahs of the Torah are not about me being a good person. It's not about me getting my reward. It's not about me fulfilling myself. It's about doing the will of Hashem. And so now here's the question. What if Hashem comes to you and says, I need you to be a Rasha? I need you to be wicked. So what would we all say? Well, obviously Hashem said to be wicked. Is that called being wicked? That's actually impossible, because you can't be wicked, because Hashem tells you to be wicked and you're doing the right thing. So Hashem tells you to be wicked, not to do the mitzvahs. Maybe you should do the mitzvahs, and that way you'll be wicked. Maybe not. Okay, but here certainly where Hashem says to Abraham, you should bring up your son. So, however, we've gone to delved into this ethical dilemma of when Hashem says, and we've come out with some sort of understanding that if Hashem says to take him, that becomes the moral. However, it cannot be that Hashem should say it if it contradicts what Hashem wants for the world as well. So we sort of are looking somehow we understand how Avraham can do it. The question now becomes on Hashem, why does Hashem do it? And for that we've had two answers so far. One, which is that Avraham has to follow through on his ability to be Moser everything, his son, and Yitzchak has to follow through on his ability to give his own life.
What happened to the idea that testing is for the person? For them to be able to see that they can... Well,
the commentaries do get into that, but it'll be the same thing. Whether it's proving it to others or proving it to the person themselves, it's still proving it to anyone outside of Hashem. And that's how some of the commentaries learn.
That doesn't seem to fit with this, that If you-
Right, that this pshat, that they're proving it to the Satan or to the attribute of justice, doesn't go with that approach. Yeah, those two are. However, there's a third explanation. I'll see if I can fit this into the little time we have, which is the approach of the Rashbam. The Rashbam says that the suffering that Avram had to endure was a result of an illegal deal that he had made with Avimelech. Right. So this is the Rashbam. Many people look at this Rashbam and they say, we know the Rashbam, much like the Ibn Ezra, will say things counter to our sages and pull out this new explanation that the Akedah is a punishment to Avraham. That's a terrible punishment. So I think, first of all, what the Rashbam means is not that he was supposed to kill his son as a punishment, but that he was supposed to think that he was going to kill his son as a punishment. However, anyone who jumps on this Rashbam and is upset with the Rashbam for giving this explanation, that the whole Akedah is a punishment, should know that there's a medrash in Yalkut Ruveni that says exactly these words that the Rashbam describes. I don't know if the Rashbam saw that medrash, but he's certainly not going against the words of our sages. So this is one of those examples where you can't really blame him. However, I want to point out that we have this concept of Elu ve'elu divrei Elokim Chaim, where we say all the approaches, certainly what's found in our sages are true, is that if there would be any hole in the issue of the Akedah, meaning if Yitzchak, if there wasn't a specific reason why it had to be Yitzchak, then Hashem would not have given Avram that test. If Yitzchak wasn't already in the place where he had to prove that he's being Moser Nefesh, and it could be that that's why Mesiras Nefesh is a more important factor than Chesed, because as we've explained, that the Moser Nefesh here means who you're really doing this for. If you're giving your life up for Hashem, because Avraham, when Nimrod puts him by the fire, he said to him, well, you believe in God, then let's throw you in the fire. Avraham could have said, a famous argument that many people have said, let me deny God now, then I'll go home and continue serving God. So it's worth the 2 minutes of sin, and then I'll go home and, well, who's making that argument? You're making that argument because you want to live. That's a selfish argument. Mosiras Nefesh means whatever, giving a life up for God. So Yitzchak has to be Moser Nefesh. Avraham needs to be Moser Nefesh. There's also an element of the deserving of the punishment which is there for some level of sin. When you put all that together, you've got a situation where it's perfect from every angle. When we say Atzur Tamim Pa'alo, that Hashem is perfect, it means that when Hashem gives you a little amount of pain, if let's say a person becomes ill, chas v'shalom, not only are you deserving to be ill for some reason, when I say deserving I mean not necessarily because you did something wrong, but for some reason there's a reason why you have to do this, there's also a reason why the person who you're supposed to help out at work, they also deserve or somehow earned that they should have to do their work alone that day. And every single person who's influenced by the effect that happens to you, unlike the judges which are in this world, who are unable to bring judgment on that level, Hashem is Hatzur Tamim Ba'alo. Every action is perfect. Every single individual is calculated. That's why the concept of reward and punishment is so complex. Because not only is every person getting what they're supposed to get, but every person who is affected by that is getting exactly what they deserve, or what they're supposed to get. And that's so complex, it's impossible for us to imagine. We put a person in prison, and then we say, well, what about that person's employees, and their family, and their children, and their friends, and society at large that has to pay for it? But with Hashem, every single thing is taken into account. So I think what these commentaries are doing is they're pointing out that the pain Avraham gets is for that reason. The actual test is for this reason. Yitzchak gets the test for this reason. It all fits together. But the key to the Akedah is the question of at what point would we listen to Hashem to do what Hashem has told us is not right, and if we still have the question of how could we do such a thing, so then that's a failure in our understanding that everything we do is because Hashem said so. So you've got there are certain groups amongst the Jewish people who have taken a whole new take to the Torah. They've tried to fit the Torah into a modern society type of moral approach. So they'll say, well, the Torah says that this thing is considered immoral. However, our society, we as a people, feel otherwise. Which means that the natural law, which means the way that we see things, we see something as being proper and okay and appropriate. So that, since that's moral, the Torah can no longer prohibit it, because we look at it as moral, as if society has the power to affect our perception of what's moral and what's not moral. And where that fails is in this understanding that morality doesn't exist outside of the Torah. It's the Torah that creates those morals. So there's something off about your judgment, not something off with the Torah. And so because these same people who claim that certain prohibitions in the Torah no longer relevant because society has changed, it just so happens that those same people read in the Torah that Abraham failed the Akedah for bringing his son. He should have said no to God. Now, at least these people have the value of being consistent within their arguments, is that there's a lishitaso there. It's the same argument. Since these people feel that the Torah gives us a set of morals, but there's a natural concept of morals that exist, and since the natural concept of morals which existed was somehow corrupt, and the Torah was written within that set of morals, so then when we are enlightened, and we come to realize a greater set of morals, then that changes, and we're no longer bound to those morals of the Torah. And so therefore we're going to rewrite the laws of the Torah, and we'll rewrite laws of kashrus, and rewrite laws of prohibited and permitted relationships. The lesson of the Akedah is to tell us that we would throw everything away, everything we've worked for, everything we've had, only to follow the word of Hashem. Just to, if I could add, please.
Are there no traditional commentators or that say that Abraham failed this test?
As far as I'm aware, this seems to be Avram's greatest accomplishment. And that's what's so striking here, is that this is something which, again, anyone who reads this story has this reaction of, what? Hashem asked him to do what? And Avram went along with it? What? And that's the natural reaction, and we're saying that natural reaction is a result of us, even though we serve Hashem within our perspectives and morals and understandings of it, and that's okay. Halavai, we should all do all the mitzvahs, even if we're not perfect within our prioritization of morals. But even there, we have to realize that we are not on the level of Avraham, who was so selfless that what Hashem says is what Hashem says, and he has no issues. He has no issues with throwing everything away because Hashem said so. That's what's moral. And we're just not there yet, and that's why it bothers us. But we can understand, at least intellectually, that if Hashem said we should not, does that mean we would be able to do it? I don't know if that means we'd be able to do it. But certainly we can understand that Abraham is greater than us for being on the level where he would just do it.
That's universally agreed in our Vayeira, that we use the Akedah for our tefillah. We use in our Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur davening.
Right.
We come back and refer to it as this.
Right. And the language is always shekavash Avram Avinu es rachmav. Avram suppressed his natural tendencies. This is just the beginning of a discussion. This debate could be taken to more steps when we delve into it further. What about the whole approach which says that there are sort of natural morals which Hashem put into the world before the laws are given? In which case, is Hashem asking us to go against what's right and proper, and that's a whole new level. Okay, we're saying that what Hashem says is what's right and proper, but there is another approach which says that it is improper, but Hashem said to do it anyway. That This is just the beginning of a discussion. But the point, the key to this, because we can never really resolve the issue of the Akedah, because really it's above us, it's beyond us, it's beyond our understanding. But as long as we come out with this understanding, that when we talk about ethical dilemmas and moral approaches to things, it's not so much what I've decided based on my experience in the society I grew up in, and the people who happen to have influenced me, and the teachers I happen to have, and the people who happen to have hurt me in my life in a certain way, which leads me to be more leaning towards one way and against the other way. That's not where our ethical measures and the way that we judge things should be, but it should be that we should be able to step out of the subject and look at it based on really the only true judge in the world, and that's the Shofet Emes, the Dayan Tzedek, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and the Torah which He gave us. And anything outside of that is just us being sort of selfish and taking that. May we be Zocha. Hashem should provide us the ability to make the right judgments in all the right cases. Thank you.
I have a question. If